So I've had the Lumix S5IIX for about 3 months. This thing is an absolute photo and video beast. There's so much to like about this, but there's a couple of things that we do have to talk about that I don't really like. But mainly I just want to share my overall experience utilizing this camera specifically for video, but also because I mainly shoot on Sony cameras and this is literally my first Lumix camera that I've owned. So yeah, let's talk about it. So first of all, we have to talk about how powerful this thing is when it comes to video specs. Like, this literally is a video camera. It's got so many features in here that professional cinema cameras have. And a lot of Sony Alpha cameras just don't have some of the features that this thing actually has. You know, anamorphic support, which is absolutely incredible because I film on anamorphics a lot when it comes to this thing. Actually, I film on anamorphics 100% of the time when it comes to this. Sure, I just bought the 50 f1.8 autofocus lens, so I can start utilizing this a little bit more often, but having the anamorphic support really draws me to this, like 6K open gate. Now, there are some people that still don't know what open gate is. Essentially, the sensor is a 3x2 shaped sensor, and you can utilize the whole 3x2 sensor to record, which is fantastic for anamorphic lenses. Now, you can actually utilize that open gate just to have a little bit more space at the top and bottom for, you know, repurposing your content for social media short form content if you're going to be using 9x16, but it generally is the best when it comes to anamorphic support. And also talking about that anamorphic support, you do have the D-squeeze in camera, so you can view it, you know, 2 times, 1.8, 1.5, which is fantastic, but also stability when it comes to that anamorphic support. So you can tune your lens and make sure that your stability is tuned directly to that lens and also that squeeze factor as well. And when I'm using my Sony FX6 with anamorphic lenses, obviously the FX6 doesn't have any image stabilization. So I do have to rig out the camera as heavy as possible to make sure I don't get any sort of micro jitters. So having stability while filming with anamorphics, I'm not really used to, but I absolutely love it. And now we do have to talk about the image quality, but just before we talk about the image quality, a couple of other features that I love is obviously shutter angle. Now, the FX3 and FX30 only just got shutter angle in the Sony cameras, but this one, you know, has had it pretty much since it dropped, which is fantastic. And when it comes to video shooters, it's just so much easier because if you do end up changing your frame rate and you forget to change your shutter speed, you're kind of stuffed. Whereas this one, you can keep it at 180-degree shutter or whatever kind of shutter angle you want, and you're not going to forget to, you know, keep that motion blur twice your frame rate. And then waveforms is one thing that the Sony cameras don't have. Sure, my FX6 does have that. That is part of the FX line. And that is one thing that I absolutely love when it comes to just getting the correct exposure in the scene. That's my favorite way of actually trying to get the exposure correctly. Secondary exposure tools, I actually use zebras, but predominantly waveforms is my favorite. So image quality is something that is quite subjective, but you know, it is a fantastic sensor. It's a 24 megapixel sensor. It gives you 6K at 25 or 30 frames per second in open gate, which is, you know, absolutely fantastic. Sure, it is a 420 codec, but it is still 10-bit, so it still gives you enough bit depth to color grade. And if you are shrinking it down to a 4K timeline, you know, people aren't really going to notice the difference. Sure, it's not like, you know, Red Raw's sort of 16-bit linear RAW codec. It's not like that, but still it's a strong 10-bit file. And sensor performance has really come to a plateau in the last few years. Sure, there are cameras now that is increasing the dynamic range, but when it comes to colors and how the image actually looks, it's all starting to look very, very similar. And the Lumix S5IIX looks absolutely fantastic. You do obviously have to learn how to do some color grading. I do have a basic color grading course that you guys can check out. I will leave a link in the description below if you want to see how I color grade my footage. And you know, once you start to learn how to treat the vlog footage and start grading on top of that, you can really pull some incredible images out of this. Like, in all honesty, when it comes to vlog, I feel like it is easier to grade than it is to grade S-Log3. Like, S-Log3, you can make it look insane, but it does take a little bit more massaging than vlog. I feel like vlog is just right from the start. As soon as you convert that vlog footage, it looks great straight out of camera, and you just got to do a few contrast tweaks, a couple of curve adjustments, and you're perfectly fine. Sony, it takes a little bit more to get there, but all camera systems, once you learn that gamma curve and how to color grade them, you know, they all look absolutely fantastic. But in saying that too, there aren't really many cameras that give you 6K open gate at this price point. Like, this is probably the cheapest camera that you can get with these kind of specs. But you know, keep in mind with the Lumix S9 and the S5 II as well, because they are cheaper than this camera, but this thing offers just so much value for that price. And if you do utilize Super 35 or APS-C lenses, especially when it comes to anamorphics, this has 4:3 anamorphic mode, which is, you know, fantastic for 1.5 times anamorphics. Now, obviously, if you are utilizing the highest codec in these things, it's going to heat up. But the great thing about this camera is it does have a fan. So you're not going to have any overheating issues with this camera, because that internal fan is just going to keep everything cool. And you're just not going to have any worries if you are on a professional job. And I mean, I do live in Australia, and in Queensland, it does get really hot in this summer. And I'm filming in, you know, some pretty intense conditions, especially when it comes to CrossFit sheds and gyms that just don't have any aircon. It can get really hot in there, and I'm keeping these cameras on all the time, so I really do appreciate the fan in there. Now, there's a couple of features that I like in this that I don't really use too often, but it is really cool that it has a couple of these, and that's SSD recording. So you can actually record straight out of that USB-C port into an SSD. And I think every camera should give you that ability to do that. I mean, I don't use SSD recording absolutely all the time, mainly for the fact that my focus handle is on the side. It's just a whole nother cord, and I can just record directly into that SD card. It's perfectly fine, but at least it gives me that ability to record directly into an SSD. Then I can plug it straight into my computer and edit directly off that, or just faster transfer speeds. And also another feature is the autofocus. Now, I'm not used to the older Lumix cameras when it comes to the contrast detection autofocus. I'm used to really fast Sony cameras, and it being fast for pretty much as long as I can remember. And this camera is very similar when it comes to Sony autofocus. Like, I still feel like, in my opinion, Sony does have a little bit of an edge when it comes to the autofocus, but this thing does just incredibly well. It sees the eye, it sees the face, it keeps things in focus, and obviously you do have to choose the correct settings to make the autofocus perform how you want it to. Now, last pro that I'm not really used to is that photography burst mode. Now, 30 frames per second is pretty impressive. And when it comes to the Sony cameras, you kind of have to get the flagship A1 to sort of get those kind of speeds, or the A9 camera. And, you know, this gives you 30 frames per second, which is fantastic. Sure, it is electronic, so you will have some banding issues if you utilize, you know, continuous lights, certain continuous lights. But still, you do have that ability if you are, you know, photographing outdoor action. 30 frames per second is really fast. And I mean, the A7 IV only does 10 frames per second with electronic shutter, which is pretty lackluster. Okay, now a couple of things that I don't like, and something that I'm not used to is that lag when it comes to utilizing the HDMI. Now, at first I was like, that's okay, it's not too bad. But then as soon as I was doing more and more sports shoots, it started to become a little bit difficult when it comes to sort of tracking the athlete, or if you're trying to focus in on, dial in on their feet or the bar, you have to preempt when that bar is going to come down, because there is a pretty significant lag. And if you are looking on that external monitor screen, you're going to be looking at a lagged image. And there are a few times I've come into post-production and I've seen the image and I haven't kept up with the action. So now when I actually utilize this, I kind of have to use my peripheral vision and see when the athlete's actually moving and go with their movement rather than looking directly at my external monitor, which kind of sucks. Like, I know Gerald Undone has a workaround where you sort of turn off the sound and that kind of makes it a little bit faster, but still there is that lag there, and it's not like what you have in other camera manufacturers. So that is one thing I really do hope they fix, either in a firmware update or if it's a hardware issue. I'm not 100% sure, but it has become a little bit of an issue. But you know, if you do that workaround and if you do sort of preempt the action, you can sort of get away with it. Now, the next one's a minor thing, and I know this is a very subjective one, and that's the SD cards. I really, really dislike using SD cards, mainly for the fact that they're just really flimsy. I prefer the CF Express Type Bs or CF Express Type As. Like the GH7 has that CF Express Type B in there, and that's phenomenal. I love utilizing this camera with that card. Obviously, it accepts a lot faster speeds, so you can actually do ProRes RAW internal directly into that CF Express Type B card. And I really just wish that this camera had that, but obviously it is a little bit sort of before the time of CF Express Type B's coming in. So obviously a future version, you would expect CF Express Type B's, but yeah, SD cards, I just don't like utilizing them. Now the next one is quite annoying, specifically if I am using the A7 IV. That's got a hybrid switch, so I do have my photo settings saved and my video settings saved, and when you switch over to one or the other, it's pretty much straight away, it clicks into, you know, the correct ISO, the correct shutter speed, or the correct aperture that I want. With this one, it doesn't have that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the only thing that you can kind of do is save your photo settings. Then when you want to go from video to photo, you have to put it into manual mode, then go into your photo settings and reload your photo settings. That's the only workaround that I've found so far. There isn't just a quick switch where you could just, you know, flick it into one mode and then it just changes from Vlog to standard. Then it's just got like the ISO 640, then it goes down to 100. You know, pretty much just performs like the A7 IV. So I haven't been able to figure that out. Please let me know in the comments below if there is an exact fix like the A7 IV, literally just one switch and it changes all that. Or it's the way that I said, that you have to go into your settings, load your camera photography settings, and then, you know, if you want to go back to video, you kind of have to load your video settings back in. Hopefully there's a quicker way, but from what I've seen, there just isn't, and I really wish that there was just that really quick switch mode. Now look, overall, the last 3 months has been incredible, just utilizing the anamorphic lenses, 6K open gate, all the video features in here that I've wanted so much in my alpha cameras that I have to, you know, go to my FX6 to get, is just amazing. And especially for the price, you're getting so much value in the S5IIX compared to the Sony alpha cameras and other camera manufacturers as well. But just overall, I'm loving using it, the ergonomics, the video quality, just absolutely everything about it. I'm just glad I actually purchased this camera for, you know, anamorphic shooting, but now I can use it for so much more because I do actually have a prime lens finally, which is fantastic. So overall, I love this camera. It's great and obviously highly recommended. I still think it's going to be a powerful camera 2025, 26, 27. There's still a few years to come. The specs in this thing will definitely hold up, which, you know, is pretty good, which is a big testament for Lumix and the direction that they're going in. So definitely watch the Lumix space in 2025 and 2026 because I feel like they're going to be coming out with some absolute banger cameras. But thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'll put the link in the description below if you do want to check out my color grading course as well. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, let's get it.